another what I would have done video, and today I decided why not discuss Spider-Man 3. Yes, Spider-Man 3 came out, I believe, in the later 2000s. Not exactly sure what year, but it's a fairly recent movie. Not as recent though as their reboot that came out last year, I believe. Was it last year? Last summer? I believe so. Last summer. Or some point last year. I can't really remember exactly. I'm horrible with dates. But either way, the fairly recent one that came out had a brand new cast, had a brand new story lineup, but basically was repeating itself. And it's basically what they call, in movie terms, a reboot. But I figured, since I have not seen that film, and since I probably won't be seeing it till a little while, I figured why not go back to Spider-Man 3, which is probably a little bit more one of the well-recognized Spider-Mans, even though a lot of people do find themselves more critical of this one, and I think it's fairly understandable to see why, especially when there's just a lot of things within it that are just amped up more than in the previous two installments, at least from what I can tell. I'm sure there'll be others that'll have various different opinions on that, and I think some people would even say that they do like Spider-Man 3. I personally don't, but I understand if some people do, or if they find that it's just find it to have some kind of appeal to their taste, or to whatever they find enjoyable about it. But for me, I personally just came away with it not really necessarily caring for it as much compared to the other previous two installments. And is it to say that the Spider-Man films are the greatest films of all time? I probably wouldn't say that, but at the same time they're still recognized superhero movies because they do have such a well-recognized superhero. I mean, Spider-Man is fairly well known among the superhero going community. I mean, he's probably one of the main superheroes along with Batman and Superman, so it seems like a lot of people appeal to Spider-Man and find a lot of what Spider-Man has to offer as a series of comic books as well as a series of movies to be valuable. Now, there are several issues that I had with the third movie that I think could have been altered to make it better. So I'm just going to briefly discuss a little bit of those things and what I would have done personally if I was in the director's chair, or again, being in charge of handling this kind of a project. Now, as you may know, Spider-Man is known as much as the villains too, because it seems like a lot of the Spider-Man films are fairly interesting. I mean, yeah, we do have some villains that can be a little bit goofy, like the Green Goblin, who I almost want to say is sort of like the Joker in a way. But I would probably compare him more to Jack Nicholson's Joker. I mean, it's sort of like this fairly campy, campy-esque type villain. And then you had Doc Ock, which was another interesting one with the arms, and then having the arms sort of control him and his emotions and his reactions to certain things. But here it seems like the villain, for the most part, is played out to be Venom, but we don't see Venom until towards the way sort of end leading up to the climax, so like the end of the middle pretty much of the film. So I think this is really what got a lot of people frustrated because they really wanted to see Venom. I mean, they wanted to see some villain on screen. Even though we do get a sense of the Sandman and such, he's not really necessarily a villain per se. He's just a criminal, really. So to see an actual villain, I think, is what set this film apart from the other two, who did and had focused on a main villain. So when you don't put the villain within the film to the point of at least the middle, then you really don't get a lot of time with the villain, and a lot of people really enjoy superheroes because of the villains, because the villains are so dark and mysterious and interesting. And we really didn't get that with Spider-Man 3 because Venom didn't show up until like later on. And I have to say, he's probably the person who really plays Venom. I think personally he's probably also, not only is he not in it the most, but I think he's the weakest compared to the other two. At least, even though I will admit the actor who played the Green Goblin can go over the top at times. I found him at least interesting, and the same thing with Doc Ock. I mean, he can have his moments of being this kind of over the top villain with arms, but or with tentacles, or however you want to describe them, or claws, but at least they had some kind of development because they were just introduced fairly early on. And with Spider-Man 3, Venom doesn't come in until much later, and the guy who really ends up playing Venom is probably the least likable of the villains, in my opinion, because he's just so he just doesn't really have a lot of presence and likability on screen. I mean, it's not the fault really of the actor so much as it is just his character and then the lines that they make him say. There's one point where Peter's in the church. I don't know if any of you remember this scene, but he's in the church and he's trying to get the black suit off of him, and the guy who becomes Venom is literally praying in the church to I think it's something to the effect of, you know, destroying Peter Parker because of the fact that he lost his job because of him, which I think is a fairly reasonable circumstance as to why you would be angry at somebody, but I don't think it would be necessarily to the point of it being so extreme in that way that he puts it, and especially when he did do something wrong. I mean, he did Photoshop those pictures, and that's really all his fault, and in the end he probably would have been caught either way. So it's just one of those things where you don't really sympathize with the villain. You don't really get behind the villain so much because he is a jerk, and that's the thing. He's not interesting, and that really leaves him to be fairly flat, and that's why I really did not get invested in that villain at all. So I think they definitely should have given Venom a better story, and just given him more development, more time. Just sort of introduce him earlier on into the story. That would have made it a lot more compelling and a lot more interesting, because literally a lot of people go to superhero movies to see the villains. A lot of people go to see Batman to see the Joker, or Bane, or whoever else. A lot of people go to see X-Men for, you know, Magneto. Really, it's a lot of people do like the villains, and if you leave the villain off to the side and then don't give him really anything interesting to do until the middle end of your movie, yeah, then it just really, that villain just ended up falling flat on its face for me. And that's why I really ended up having issues with it while I was watching it. So it would have been a lot more interesting had they made the villain, I think, done in and presented to us in the middle, at least the middle, the latest, towards the end of the beginning, or early middle, or mid-middle, but not all the way towards the way end with the climax. I just don't think that really allows for people to really get invested in what the villain has to offer. And then I think what a lot of people got mad at is because Venom dies. and people are just going, wait, what, he dies? No, he doesn't get another movie? What? You know? Because, I mean, it kind of would be understandable had they made another film, and then they could have given him more development there. But nope, they kill him off. So, yeah, that villain was literally, I think, such a waste. And it's sad, it's unfortunate. I think they could have done so much more with that villain, but they chose not to, and they chose to save him for the fairly last parts of the movie and not give him that much of an interesting story or an interesting part within the story that it really, I think, dragged the film down. So that's definitely something that I would have changed. Make Venom show up at least within the midsection where he is Venom. That would have made a lot more sense in the beginning, middle, or end of the beginning, towards that section, just a lot earlier than what they did. And I think that would have just brought a lot more to the table as far as what you could have done with Venom, because he's probably one of the more interesting villains, I think, of Spider-Man. Probably a little bit more interesting than maybe somebody like Doc Ock. So really, when you don't give him that much time, it doesn't really bring a lot to the table. So yeah, that's just something that I think I would have definitely changed. More screen time with Venom so we could get more of a character, more development. Second point, less comedy. I think people have heard me mention this before, but I think ultimately what this third installment of Spider-Man should have had was less comedy. And what I mean by that is no Saturday Night Fever struts, no dancing, no pelvic thrusts. We don't need that in a Spider-Man movie. You can make dialogue funny. I mean, a lot of superhero movies, I mean, at least for the most part, I don't think are really, they're not funny in really what the hero is doing, so much as they're funny in what the hero has to say. And the thing is, too, is that Spider-Man is a hero that says stuff. He's supposed to say witty, funny, nerdy dialogue because he is kind of this, has this kind of humor that surrounds his character. And what the director ends up doing is he sets him up as this funny entertainer, you know, who dances and makes a fool of himself. That's really not what Spider-Man's supposed to really do as a character. And when you're having him do this kind of comedy, it doesn't really reflect upon the people who know Spider-Man or who know really the character well, because it just pushes it off into that direction of it being so forced. Like, you have to find something. Okay, you know, he has this dark, you know, thing that he's going through, but let's make him dance, and let's make him, you know, swift over to the tables and be on the dance floor and, you know, woo women and stuff. And I just go, he's not really supposed to do that. That's not really what Spider-Man's supposed to be doing. It's just not funny, and so I think that's really what a lot of people had issues with the third Spider-Man installment, was just the fact that there was this kind of comedy that felt forced. And does that mean that they had to get rid of all of the comedy? Absolutely not. I'm sure they could have kept in some comedy and it would have been totally fine. But to go so over the top, and all of the other films, although they had their very cheesy, funny moments, nothing felt so over the top as the third one, as from what I've seen. I mean, the third one just takes the cake in how over the top and cheesy it tries to be, especially with Peter dancing, and yet we're supposed to sort of take his problems with the suit seriously, and that's what I think makes it hard from the audience. The audience doesn't know what to feel, and I think that was the problem I had with the comedy, is I didn't even know when I was supposed to laugh, or even if I was supposed to laugh at all. It doesn't create direction with the actors, with the atmosphere. It just doesn't provide the audience with an understanding of what they're supposed to feel. So I think definitely if they minimized the comedy, they could have definitely made this a lot more of a serious but cool and edgy and sometimes comedical Spider-Man. Third point. Now this is kind of a flaw that's been not just within the third installment, but with the second and also the first one too, is Mary Jane's character. But in particular in this one, although she doesn't get saved as much, at the same time there's really not a whole lot of development with her within these movies. It would have been nice had they given her more of an interesting dynamic, because we've seen her for the past 3 movies. And literally the fact that this film doesn't try to improve upon the other films, which is really what sequels and all these other types of movies are supposed to do, is they're supposed to sort of enhance everything and give something more to the audience. But here, there's really not a lot more with Mary Jane that they're doing. It seems like they're just making her the damsel in distress and the sidelines girlfriend who has issues with her boyfriend, and that's all her character really is. And it would have been nice had they made her maybe, I don't know, save the day once, or, you know, defend herself, or, you know, have her just do something. And it seems like here, a lot of the time, you know, she can't even tell Peter when something bad is happening. You know, it seems like even though she already knows that he's Spider-Man, that for some reason she doesn't want to tell him the truth about certain things that are happening. And in particular, I'm talking about within their relationship, and how I believe it's Harry at one point sort of threatens her with Peter, and I think we should have been over this kind of, you know, oh, I threatened to hurt somebody else, you know, game, because we've seen it before. I mean, that's the problem I think I had too with this movie too, is just that we've seen this kind of plot turn go already. You know, we've already seen it with Peter, okay, but we don't need to see it with Mary Jane too. you know, and if in case you guys are not sure what I'm discussing, it's in particular when Harry tells Mary Jane about how he'll, you know, hurt Peter unless she dumps him or something like that. It's something to that effect, and I remember it distinctly being similar, like to that being sort of the case, and something to that effect, like Harry threatens her to break up with Peter for whatever reason, and she does, without questioning it and without saying yeah, or saying no, I'm not going to do that, and no, I'm going to stand up for myself here. And I'm going to stand up for what I want. No, it's okay, Peter, or okay, Henry, I'll do whatever you want. And that's the thing, is we've seen that in the past two movies, except more with Peter, and the fact that he has to hide this whole identity that he has as Spider-Man, and then now her having to hide this from him. It just really shows that this whole like love game that they're playing just gets so old, and that the whole plot that they had set up with that was just so overdone already that, oh, it was just frustrating. So they really needed to give Mary Jane something better to do. They really needed to make her character more dynamic, and instead of being this puppet to experiment with and create drama with, regarding her romantic relationship with Peter. It's just, she should have just been given more to do. And I think that's just really a major issue that I had with it, because it's just been happening already for the past two movies, and that they've not improved upon that. Just shows that it's not a sequel that I want to get invested in. And finally, the last and fourth and final big, I think, issue that I can bring up with this film has to do with the whole idea of Peter being somehow tortured by the suit. I do not feel any sympathy for him in that entire movie at all. I did not feel 1 inch of sympathy of what he was going through with that suit at all. Like, I mean, he just keeps doing one dumb thing after another dumb thing, that it's just so hard for me as a viewer in the audience trying to get and absorb what this issue is with this suit. And really, it just turns him just... It doesn't really do anything to him so much as it just makes him just jerky and on the sense of more comedically jerky. Excuse me, I wanted to get some water here. And I don't understand why they needed to do that. I don't get it. Why couldn't they have actually made him tortured by the suit? Why couldn't they actually have a scene where it shows sort of his mind, and how the suit is sort of controlling his mind? And really, they needed to make him more tortured in a more darker sense, because that's really how they marketed this movie. They marketed this movie like this was gonna be dark. This was gonna be a dark Spider-Man. Like, you saw all the posters and it would just be of him in the dark suit. They really marketed this up that this is gonna be a dark, serious take on Spider-Man, which would make the film rather interesting, since the other ones are more light and more Avenger type-esque style. So to see the director kind of morph into something else would have been rather interesting, and I think that's why a lot of people were essentially pumped to see the movie. But then finally, when the movie comes out and then you see that Peter's he's just behaving more like a typical jerk rather than a sort of tortured, psychologically disturbed jerk, or a jerk that at least has dimensions to him, you really don't feel for the character. And to be honest, I didn't feel anything, and it's so hard because I look at this film and I see so much potential within it, and then the direction that they went was just, no, why did you go in this direction? You shouldn't have gone in this direction. Please don't tell me you went in this direction. So instead of taking his torture and the sense and trying to make it comedy driven, I think it should have definitely been a lot more serious, because when you mix dark comedy or dark elements with comedy, then you really need to know how to really balance it and make it work. And usually those things work with something like the Addams Family, or where everybody's all darkly dressed, and but they still have this charm and likability to them. But here there's neither charm nor likability, nor necessarily dark elements, because it's overshadowed with this kind of jerky jerk comedy that they make out of Peter's character. And I don't understand it. I really don't understand why they decided to go with this kind of a route, especially when they had the comic book that they could have relied on. And I think the Nostalgia Critic goes into this at some point too. He discusses too how in the comic, it really shows how Peter was literally tortured by the suit, and how the suit really messes him up. But it seems like a lot of what happens to him with the suit, like literally, we don't see what happens to him with the suit. All we see is these little bits of goop coming up and attaching to his skin, and then literally when it goes all over his body, he wakes up, and then it goes to the next scene, and you don't see any of what really happens ultimately once the suit is finally taken a hold of him. So we don't have a sense of what the character is going through. And it seems like a lot of what the character goes through is really off camera. And this is a really big issue, and I really believe that it would have been a lot better had they approached it on a more darker level. If they were going for this route, and if they were going for this idea of him having that suit. So yeah, I mean, I think that's really the only the four biggest issues that I could really bring up with the third movie, for the most part. Do the other two films have flaws in them as well? Absolutely, there's no doubt about that as well. These other films that Sam Raimi made, they have their faults too, but I still think that out of the three, the third one is the weakest, because of the fact that they downplayed a villain fairly greatly, which did not work for them and did not work to their advantage, because it would have been like if the Dark Knight decided to put they market the Joker and the fact that the Joker's in it, but they only show the Joker for maybe a couple of scenes, and then that's it, and then the Joker dies. How disappointing would that have been? And I think that's the same thing that people got out of this movie. Had they downplayed the comedy and not made the comedy geared towards this unnecessary dancing and Saturday Night Fever strutting, and yeah, just no, it just does not do anything for me, and I don't understand why it's supposed to be funny. I don't get, just because you're parroting something doesn't make it funny, and just because you do pelvic thrusts doesn't make it funny. It makes you go, what? You're supposed to be tortured by this suit? What? It doesn't make any sense. It seems like the suit is making you, it's just making you kooky or something. Not really torturing you. And then definitely I think if they made Mary Jane's character more interesting, it would have brought up the film a lot higher, because again, she's not been given a lot to do for the past 2 movies, and it would have been nice had she gotten out of that sort of role that she's been in for the past 2 movies. But nope, they decided to keep her in that role, and they made it, I think, a lot worse, because they didn't, because they made her seem so much more vulnerable to the circumstances, especially when she has to lie to Peter about that one point of them not being able to be together. I'm just like, you can't repeat this. You can't repeat the same plot point that you made, but with Peter. It's ridiculous. This is just so not. This is so not what writers should do. But yeah, that's basically the summing up the 3rd point. And finally, the 4th point is obviously make it more about Peter and the suit. Make it more about how it's really messing him up. The film doesn't really go into that, and if you are advertising that this film is going to go into that, then you're going to have a lot of people who are mad, and I can understand why a lot of people are mad at this film. But for the most part, I think that's really all I can say about this film as a whole. I don't think it's horrible. Again, I'm not saying that this film is so bad. I understand if you like it. I understand if you can find something to grasp onto, but it really didn't do much for me. And I think really what didn't do much for me was the fact that I had to bring up these various points. I think that those were the reasons what I would have done to make it better, because I think these faults really bring the movie down a lot. But doesn't make it horrible. I don't think it's a horrible movie. I just don't think it's the greatest. I guess how I would rate this is basically the highest of what I would have done so far is probably Avatar. Spider-Man 3 is in the middle, and then Twilight is the least. Even though I haven't seen Twilight, I can still say from just like watching the trailers and watching people's reviews on it constantly, and seeing all of these different things that come out of Twilight, I can say, yeah, Twilight's probably the lowest of the low. But this movie, I think, has its faults too. It has still some good aspects to it. Again, with the Sandman, I think a lot of people think that the Sandman was a really well done character, and I think, yeah, that was done well. The action set pieces were done nicely, but again, yes, these are these major problems that I've had with it, and I think that had they done these particular things, they could have improved it a lot for the better. But this, again, this is just my opinion. I'm sure there's other people that would have liked to, who would like to add something or say they would have done something differently too, and I'd be more than happy and more than interested, or very interested to hear any of your thoughts, comments, questions, or concerns. But again, this isn't a video based upon I'm right, you're wrong. This is just my opinion, and humblest. But I think that's really all I can say. Again, any questions, comments, concerns, more than happy to answer them, and till next time.